Hello, this is actually the second video I've uploaded on this subject. The other one I had to cancel, and that's always frustrating after I upload a video, but sometimes I do review them, and if the sound quality is so awful that it's just not worth uploading, or if there's some mitigating factor, then I will have to sacrifice them. I don't like doing that because it is obviously time wasting. The other thing that's frustrating is the last video I uploaded initially after the event. So the thoughts that I was putting forth were fresh. They were directly after the event, but there's nothing I can do about it. The other one was simply too long, and I seem to be having a problem at the moment with the uploading speed. So we'll try and make this a bit more condensed. I want to talk about the Question Time leaders event last night between Jeremy Corbyn and Theresa May. This was not a debate in the conventional sense because it was not a head-to-head debate. Now, there's been about three or four events in this election cycle, and I think it's going to be something that's going to stay around. There has been some public criticism of these events in the particular format, whether it be criticism of Jeremy Paxman's constant interrupting or just the general format. I think they're going to be here to stay, nevertheless, because I think when you introduce something like this, and the UK was a relative latecomer in televised debate events. France, the United States, and numerous other countries had this before we did. So I think now that we have got them, I don't think they're going to go away anywhere. I can't see a situation whereby in the next election they're going to be cancelled outright. Um, so basically, if you don't know, Question Time is a long-running BBC debate program, and usually the format is that you have a panel of about five people. It's chaired by David Dimbleby, who is a long-serving newsman, long-serving presenter. Um, he also does general election coverage, and basically, the general idea is to try and have a rough balance between a left-right pendulum, both in the panel and in the audience. Now, in the panel, usually that would mean a representative of the government, usually a government minister, usually an opposition representative. Sometimes they're opposite number, not always. Usually a representative of a third party, and then usually a journalist and some sort of TV personality. It could be a presenter, occasionally even a sports person or something like that, just to get a general wide range of views. In theory, the audience is supposed to be balanced. It's supposed to be a cross section of the community. There have been accusations from both left and right that the audience is biased. Now, before I continue, incidentally, the format of the program is a roadshow, so it goes from city to city across the country. Last night's event was at the University of York. Question Time came to Sunderland, my city, about 2 months ago, but I didn't get around to making it. So, yeah, about the audience. In theory, it's supposed to be as balanced as possible. I will say this, though. The BBC gets criticised by both sides, and something I find a little bit contentious is that if you get someone getting up, and this has been particularly the case with Jeremy Corbyn supporters, if someone gets up and calls himself a Conservative supporter, or they come out with a Conservative opinion or a Conservative leaning question, people immediately get out the pitchforks and say, oh, it's biased BBC, this is a Tory plant. But right wing people could say the same thing because these events, there's usually a big pro Jeremy Corbyn contingent, as there clearly was last night. So, in the end of the day, I think it's very difficult for the BBC to really get absolutely balanced. They try their best. They get a third Conservative supporting a third, Labour supporting, and a third undecided. Just because someone comes out with an opinion that you don't like or a question that you don't like doesn't automatically mean that they're a plant. Now, I know there was a Tory councillor at one of the last events, but doesn't mean anything. Anyway, I'm going to talk about last night's event in a minute, but a brief word or two about the previous events. One of them involved five party leaders outside the two main leaders. So that was the leaders of the Scottish Nationalists, the Liberal Democrats, UKIP, Plaid Cymru, should say four party, and the Greens, five, yeah. So that was Nicola Sturgeon, Tim Farron, Deanne Wood, Paul Nuttall, and Caroline Lucas. I believe that was on ITV. There were some people deriding that as a losers' convention, which was, take that as you will. The other event on the BBC did include Jeremy Corbyn, but there was a Conservative representative there. It wasn't the Prime Minister, it was Amber Rudd, the Home Secretary. On a personal level, she got some praise on the grounds that her father had actually passed away 2 days before. So that's quite something to go into a nationally televised debate, um, when you've had a major personal family loss like that. So I guess, you have to respect her courage, frankly, in that regard. Nevertheless, she was the Conservative representative and she had to fend off the constant questions from the other leaders as to why Theresa May was not there. Amber Rudd's the Home Secretary, she's not the Prime Minister. It is a powerful position. I would call it the joint third or fourth most powerful position in the country, but it's not the Prime Minister. I think in not turning up to these events in a face to face debate, Theresa May has made a very big mistake. She argues that the public get to see her being scrutinised every week with Prime Minister's questions. She has also said that she doesn't think the public like to see politicians having a go at one another. There's some truth in that, and I don't think the debates necessarily completely change the outcome of an election. However, I also think she's underestimated the impact that perception has, because the perception is one of arrogance, that she is expecting a coronation. That she has defended her position as I'm going out, I'm canvassing, I'm answering questions, which she has been, but I do feel that she's made a mistake by not taking on Jeremy Corbyn face to face, and she knows it's not the same as Prime Minister's questions. With Prime Minister's questions, you have your entire party behind you. It's not the same thing, and she knows it. So I think that was a major Achilles heel that she has exposed. And if the polls have indeed narrowed, which appears to be the case, I think that will at least be part of the reason. I'll just say from the outset, I believe that Jeremy Corbyn probably won last night. And I'm saying that as someone who really is between the two. Um, I think he won because he came across as more comfortable overall with the situation. With Theresa May, I should say this was the University of York. So you could argue it was going to be a left wing sort of audience, as usually universities are. However, it wasn't just students in the audience, it was also members of the public there, and there were clearly some right leaning opinions in that audience. Both leaders got cheers, both leaders got heckles at certain points, but the louder cheers, I think, were for Jeremy Corbyn. He was cheered as he came into the studios. There was a big crowd waiting outside in York to cheer him. It seems wherever he goes, Jeremy Corbyn gets cheered. There's big crowds wherever he goes. Now, there's no question about it. A lot of these people are going to be Labour people. They're going to be Corbyn supporters. But he seems to have galvanised that public showing of support in a way that Theresa May hasn't. I mean, where's the where's all the Tories out to cheer their candidate? It's a little bit strange. You may occasionally get photo shoots with a few dozen people, but there does seem to be a difference there, and that is quite audible. What I'm seeing with Jeremy Corbyn is something akin to William Gladstone's Midlothian campaign, when you get big crowds out to greet their candidate. The only other politician in recent memory I can recall having that sort of support was Nick Clegg before he went into the coalition government. He had some pretty enthusiastic support as well. Of course, it doesn't mean that Jeremy's going to win, it just means that he's got enthusiastic support. But I would say that to Jeremy Corbyn supporters, just because someone asks a right wing question doesn't mean that they're a Tory plant. That's absurd. We live in a democracy. People have different opinions. Um, so there is, Corbyn supporters do risk making it look like a personality cult if they are going to pounce on anyone who dares ask questions. It's ridiculous. But I do think Jeremy Corbyn won on the ground simply he appeared to be more at ease, and he immediately scored points by saying it's a great pity that Theresa May wasn't here to face me. Now, what he was doing there was being assertive, getting on the offensive. What the right wing media has done from the very start is tried to present Corbyn as loony left, as weak. I do think he has some very questionable policy positions, but I do also believe that he has defied some of his critics, and I think he has shown a certain degree of toughness and grit. He has put up with a huge amount of personal attack, and he has shown a great deal of civility in response to that. Jeremy Corbyn could turn around and call his opponents fascists or far right or all sorts of names. He doesn't, and that is something I do respect Jeremy Corbyn for. Whatever you think of his politics, he does not necessarily get into ad hominem attacks. Some of his supporters certainly do. He personally doesn't. And whatever you think of the man, it's impossible not to recognise that there is a fundamental civility in the way that he tries to conduct his politics overall. There were, of course, sticking points for both candidates. Theresa May, of course, it was with the Tories' cuts programme and the big cuts to public services. There was one point when a young woman basically broke down. She was partially sighted. She had had to wait a year on the NHS while she went through work capability assessments, and she basically broke down. Now, the Prime Minister knew full well that there was basically nothing she could say in retort to that, so she just said, I've got no excuse, which was really the only answer she could give. But the fact of the matter is, Theresa May has not reviewed this situation from the Cameron years. The Tory welfare approach remains as ruthless as ever, it remains as degrading as ever, and it remains focused on basically trying to punish the unemployed and treat people like criminals in everything but name. It's an assumption of guilt. It's basically treating people like they're all fraudsters, like they're all hiding something, and it degrades people. And yes, it has directly led to suicides. This is a complete disgrace of the Cameron May years, and it's something that should never be forgotten. Um, so that aspect of the Tories, the nasty party, I think Theresa May and her party has a long way to go in repealing that image. And for her to bring up fox hunting again as if it's a major priority, it doesn't exactly help. For something like that, I think she should wait until she wins and then bring it up. I'm against it, but it simply reinforces the image of a negative public image. I mean, even most Tories don't particularly support fox hunting. The only people who support fox hunting is, frankly, country toffs. Call that reverse snobbery, but that is the image. They seem to be the only people that really are die-hard fox hunt supporters. But yeah, so I think getting over that image is a big thing. Before I continue on Jeremy Corbyn's performance, just want to focus a little bit on this changing dynamic with the polls. This was the Week magazine about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. So you have here Theresa May, sort of presenting her as a Mao type figure, the cult of May. I can assure you we have no personality cult of Theresa May in this country. But it's classic British satire. It's just kind of mocking the idea that there is this perception that she's going to get a coronation. And I guess it's mocking the right wing media for holding her up as en route to win. This is the week yesterday. In Corbyn catch up, so it's not outright saying that he's going to win, but it's clearly showing that there's a shifting dynamic there. If you look at the cartoon, he looks rather optimistic. The thing I like about the week, I think their cartoons are high quality. Some satire I think is ruined by the fact that you have to have a little think about who they're actually depicting. It's just not very good quality illustrations. The week has world class satire. It's a British magazine, it's weekly. There is an American equivalent, but basically its format is great because they also have this way of presenting world news like this. They just basically panorama. They just show select the news from around the world. So that's basically showing this shift change, and I think a big part of that is May refusing to take part in a head-to-head debate. I think she's made a big mistake with that. With Jeremy Corbyn now, again, like I say, came into quite strong support. However, he certainly had his share of critics, and particularly on the nuclear issue, and particularly on his response to terrorism. I'm not going to go over again how I feel about this. I spoke about it in the previous video on why I believe the left are wrong to explain terrorism by just being a rebound. I'm not going to go through all that again, but I think the problem that Jeremy Corbyn has, I mean, Theresa May looked uncomfortable even when there was Tory supporters there for her. She just looked uncomfortable in the situation. Corbyn looked more comfortable talking to people. However, he also looked like a man who's genuinely passionate about what he believes in. Theresa May looks like she's coming out more with sound bites. Strong and stable, strong and stable, strong and stable. Someone's worked out she said that around 200 times in this campaign. And if the idea is to reinforce the image, it's going to do the opposite and it's going to reinforce perhaps her reputation as being a bit monotone. What I find interesting, apologies, I'm backtracking a little bit here, but what I find interesting is that when she came into office, she had a bit of a honeymoon period, quite a long honeymoon period, in the sense that she was enjoying relatively high poll numbers. I think it was because she was seen to be more of a distant figure, and people actually liked that because they found the call me Dave, call me Tony school of politics like the kind of reality TV type budsy, buddying up thing that Tony Blair and David Cameron done to be a bit inauthentic. I'm not saying that's my position, but I think that's how some people saw it. They saw that as insincere. I think with May, it's not that they see her as more sincere, they don't. But I think that was maybe just a bit of a detachment from that. But now that's starting to backfire, and being seen as too distant. She's being seen as almost, dare I say it, the ice queen. Um, there's a lot of areas the Tories are going to suffer from. But I think when it comes to national defence, Jeremy Corbyn made the good point that Tory cuts to the police are themselves going to be a big barrier in dealing with terrorism, and I think he's right about that. And that was a good rebound for the sort of criticism that is levelled against him. I think Dimbleby done a good job last night, though I think he should have been a bit more assertive in stepping in when some of the questions were going around in circles. They covered the Trident issue in quite a lot of detail. Then the guy got up and asked the same question again. I think at that point Dimbleby should have sort of said, "Well, we've covered this. Let's move on." It took Jeremy Corbyn himself to say that. Jeremy Corbyn, low, might suffer from the fact he's seen to be a bit of an idealist rather than endorsing real politic, and I think that's an area where may gain ground. It may actually be that people think Corbyn is a more honest, decent, and person driven more by compassion. But Theresa May is deemed to be a far more effective leader because she is far more involved in real politic, i.e., reality. I think part of the problem that Jeremy Corbyn faces is, he makes these speeches about how awful nuclear weapons are, they can kill millions of people, etc. But the question is about scenarios. The question was about scenarios, and Dimbleby also pushed him on this point. But that's idealism. What would you actually do? Now Corbyn didn't answer that question, and I think that probably backfired a bit. He should have just said outright, "I wouldn't press a button." If he really does believe in it, then just say it. Say, "I wouldn't press the button." Um, so I suspect there's people around him that are kind of telling him what to say in this regard. To be fair, he's going to be criticised either way. If he doesn't answer the question, he'll be accused of flip flopping, and if he is honest, well, he'll be portrayed as weak. Personally speaking, although I don't actually think that Trident is the number one issue when it comes to national defence. Believe it or not, I don't believe that's the number one issue. I'm not convinced that we should get rid of it, but I think some right wingers make a mistake of kind of making it a bit black and white. Like if someone opposes Trident, they're a loony lefty who doesn't want this country to be defended. I think that's nonsense. There's plenty of powerful countries that don't have nuclear weapons, so that's a bit of a. I think it's a little bit of a low attack. But basically, I do think that Corbyn could suffer from the fact that he's seen as an idealist rather than a realist, and that again is an attack that even some of people who are going to support him say they support him because they agree with his policies, but they're also concerned about where the money's going to come from. Like, is it going to be a big giveaway. I don't think that's entirely case, but he needs to keep stressing the point that it is fully costed. Otherwise, that's going to be the image that he attracts, that he is an idealist rather than a realist. And with the world that we live in, maybe people will ultimately vote for the realist. But whether that's fair or not, politicians at their level are going to be viewed in a particular way, whether they like it or not. Theresa May will be seen as cold and distant. Jeremy Corbyn will be seen perhaps as very naive. But ultimately, we'll see what happens on June the 8th. There you have it. That's my views on last night's question time. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts.